10 seconds. That's what the sergeant gave me. 10 seconds to comply while my 9-year-old squeezed my fingers and the smell of brown sugar glaze and charcoal drifted up like Sunday mercy, and with the sun bouncing off badges at my side gate, I remember thinking, this is how a good day learns how to limp. My name is Caleb Mercer, newly minted ATF Regional Director for the Coastal Division. I wish I could tell you promotions taste like champagne, but to me they taste like hickory smoke and salt air, and the first bite of ribs you swear you're saving for later, but you never do. We were in my backyard in Willow Harbor, North Carolina, the kind of neighborhood where folks wave in the morning and close the blinds at dusk, and if you've lived anywhere like that, you already know what I mean. My wife Lena works cybercrime for the Bureau, the one you want when your phone won't shut up because somebody in a basement 3 time zones away decided, you look like a good project. Our oldest friend Tom Alvarez is DEA and can hear 6 kinds of laughter and tell you which one means trouble. Our circle isn't flashy, just people who stand with their backs to fences out of muscle memory, not fear, because training doesn't turn off just because the radio's not on your belt. You know what I mean? It was one of those lazy Carolina Saturdays, hot enough to make the air hum. Kids were chasing the sprinkler. Aunties were auditioning potato salad like it was county fair final round. I was in a green polo that had no chance against the heat, but I loved it anyway. Maya kept streaking by dripping wet and pure joy. And 2 houses down, Mrs. Keene was on her porch being the porch police potting soil with no plant in it, a phone near her elbow like an altar, and I kept the grill steady because that's my job. When family gathers, feed the people, control the flame, let them feel safe. Somewhere between flipping ribs and rescuing a tray of corn that wanted to be charcoal, I felt it. The rhythm change, not a sound, exactly more like the bass of your neck, telling you the song just switched. I looked up and saw a blink of glass down the street, binoculars catching sunlight, a dark SUV tucked behind a maple, another car set the wrong way, like it was staring. I counted positions because that's a habit you don't put down, and I thought, all right, then let's see who wants to be right today. Lena bumped my shoulder and asked softly, "We good?" And I said, "We've got watchers. Probably a call from the porch, not yet on the courtesy call. Let's give them a chance to be right." And I slipped my phone under a towel so the front camera could peek through the fence slats. Not for the internet, for the truth. Memory is better with receipts. Tom wandered over pretending to check on Corn Eyes already in work mode and smirked. "You gonna let us eat with our feelings?" I told him. 5 minutes chips if you're weak, he said. Mercy is overrated, and then glanced toward the street and gave me a slow nod that said, "You see it too," and I nodded back. And for the next 47 minutes, the absurdity built a house brick by brick while we tried to just be people. I handed Lena $40 to pay her back for ice and sodas and told her, "Don't let Tom bully the watermelon," and somewhere across the street, "I promise you a pencil-notched cash exchange at the main table in a notebook." Reggie Holt, Deputy U.S. Marshal, stood behind his wife Monique with one hand on her chair, because 8 months pregnant in July is an Olympic event, and he's a good man. Janelle Park from the Secret Service did a tiny reposition to put the fence at her back because once you've learned to see sight lines, your body won't let you forget them. None of us were playing tough guy, we were just being exactly who we are for a living, and to someone who doesn't understand that it looks like choreography for trouble. The gate latch clicked and the backyard got small. The first voice came in smooth and clipped like it had practiced in a mirror. "Ladies and gentlemen, Willow Harbor Police," everyone remained calm. Front man wore sergeant stripes, square jaw, gray stubble, certainty first, and questions never. I knew his name from briefings, but he didn't know that I knew it. Sergeant Dennis Kroll, flanked by 5 officers in a half circle that says you're not running unless you plan to meet the dirt hands near holsters, but not drawn the theater of control that pretends to breathe easy. And I set my tongs down, wiped my hands slow on a towel, stepped forward with palms open because language is more than words. It's posture and patience, and the way you hold your eyes. "Sergeant," I said, "this is a private family gathering. What's the problem?" He treated the question like it was an interruption and not the whole point. "We received reports of suspicious activity. We'll need everyone to move away from the house and form a single line for individual questioning." And the phrase "suspicious activity" landed like a brick dropped in a bowl of potato salad. Lena leaned in and said, "What exactly is suspicious smoke laughter?" "My kid's sprinkler." And he cut her off with a ma'am that had edges on it, the kind that scrapes a little bit of your patience when it passes. "We'll be asking the questions." Out of the corner of my eye, I clocked how my people shifted, Janelle easing to keep every angle in view, Reggie staying between Monique and the moving arc of bodies. Tom showing both hands like I'm not trying to play hero and to a notebook across the street. It probably reads as training for violence, but to me it's the same thing that keeps kids from getting knocked over when men who love control start moving furniture that isn't theirs. Sergeant. I said, plain and firm, I'm Caleb Mercer. This is my home, before you separate children from parents. I'm asking for the legal basis of your investigation. He measured me like a man reading a sky and deciding to take the boat out anyway, Mr. Mercer. We have reason to believe this is a coordinated criminal gathering. You'll get your answers after we have control of the scene. Tom stepped in calm and said, I can make this simple. Agent Tom Alvarez, DEA, call the... And Kroll snapped like a mousetrap. Sir, impersonation of a federal officer is a felony. Another word, and you'll be detained. Janelle laced her fingers and said, just verify with Secret Service Protective Ops Special Agent Janelle Park badge number. And he cut her off with enough hand touching the holster without drawing that tiny unconscious check that reads like thunder to anyone with our training. Maya picked the worst possible perfect moment. To be honest. Daddy, are they not eating with us? Her voice was clean as a bell and every adult felt it land. Reggie's jaw flexed once Monique set her hand across her belly and breathed slow. Lena shifted to put her body between our daughter and the men who thought forming a line was a kind of peacekeeping, and I felt the decision in my bones better to be who I am than pretend we can laugh this down. Officer, I said, you're about to make a mistake that will outlive your pension. Call your chief and verify credentials for Mercer Alvarez Park. Holt Brooks, you're not looking at what you think you're looking at. Kroll leaned into his performance and gave me his 10-second speech comply or obstruction, and somewhere behind his left shoulder a younger officer looked at his partner, with doubt. He couldn't hide that look matters, you know what I mean? The look that says, what if we're wrong? I raised my hands higher so nobody later got to say I had done something I hadn't. Then I said, fine, arrest me here next to my daughter, but she does not leave my sight, and Kroll said, children will be processed according to procedure, like he was talking about packages, and not little humans who'd just learned something ugly about uniforms. I felt a cold. I don't feel often. And Lena's voice turned tight as a snare drum. She held out her badge and ID and said, Detective Lena Brooks, FBI, 15 years verify with Charlotte Field. Tom listed the DEA duty line and SAC Mendez. Janelle added a number that anybody in our world would recognize. Reggie said, U.S. Marshals Southeast Task Force Chief. Deputy Franklin and Kroll tried to drown the room by raising his voice. Nobody talks except to answer direct questions form a line on the grass, and you could feel the neighborhood lean in from behind blinds and hedges to see if tonight would be a story they told with admiration or fear. The smallest mercy came like a thread of sound. A radio crackled soft near the young officer with doubt in his eyes. I didn't hear words, I heard urgency. And he looked at Kroll like, hey Sarge, maybe we should. Kroll ignored it. He said, time's up, and nodded. His guys started to move, my palms stayed high, and I said, last chance, pick up your radio, call your chief and ask him who I am. And right then, every radio on every belt spit the same voice into the heat. All units be advised. Verification returns positive. Caleb Mercer confirmed, ATF Regional Director, Coastal Division. Additional notifications from FBI, DEA, USMS, and USSS indicate multiple federal personnel on scene. Suspend enforcement action pending command review. And that's the moment the air went out of the performance. You could see chests drop a half-inch. Hands slide off the check position near the holster. Two of the officers took a small, honest step back from the kids because they suddenly saw children. Where before they'd been watching a crowd, Tom laughed once with no humor in it. Lena didn't bother saying, told you because I married someone who prefers evidence to victory laps. Kroll looked like a man reading his own headline and hating the font he tried to salvage dignity with. We'll verify again. Then his chief came through like a knife sharpening itself on concrete. Sergeant Kroll, do not make arrests without my authorization. Do not separate minors. De-escalate and secure report to my office when finished. And if you've ever heard a command that closes doors, you know how that sounded. I took a breath I hadn't realized I was holding and chose not to enjoy the moment. Pride is expensive. People forget that I turned to the young officer and said, Officer Lamb, thank you for checking. That probably saved somebody's career tonight. He swallowed hard and nodded. Sir, you did your job, I said. Then I looked at Kroll, because we had to decide if this would be a public brawl or an adult conversation. Sergeant, we can do this the long way or the short way. The short way is, you acknowledge you chose a story and dragged facts to match it. You apologize to the civilians you frightened, especially a pregnant woman and children. You treat this as a training failure rooted in bias, not a tactical misunderstanding. You preserve all body cam, KAD logs, and radio traffic, and you go explain it to your chief before I do, and I held his eyes because sometimes mercy looks like a clean set of instructions. He stood there long enough for the smoke to sting. Then he walked toward Monique and Reggie like his boots were heavy. He said, "Ma'am, I'm sorry for the fear I caused. That was wrong." Not the best apology in the world, but his voice had finally found the truth. He knelt to look Maya in the face and said, "I'm sorry I scared your party. My kid, who has a better compass than I ever did, at 9 squeezed my hand and said thank you for apologizing. Maybe next time just ask if you can have a plate and you could feel 50 yards of street soften at the edges because children tell the truth without charging you full price." We turned the grills to low. We put water in hands that needed more than they wanted to admit. Lena calmly walked Kroll through the numbers he had ignored. Tom told one of the officers, "Please write this down. Observation is not proof. Posture can be training and still be innocent." Janelle watched the street for anyone who might want to turn humiliation into spectacle. I built a list in my head the way I always do: who listened, who doubled down, who looked away, because the minutes after a mistake are where character shows up or leaves. Later that night, the phones began to buzz, like they do when the system recognizes its own mess. Chief to chief, legal to legal union reps threading needles. Some folks worried about headlines, some worried about lawsuits, a few about the truth. We sent our video and timestamps to our liaison office, not to flex, but to make sure the record said what it needed to say. Sunlight is a disinfectant if you let it be. A week later, the chief asked for a meeting. No cameras, no cookies, just a legal pad and a face that understood the difference between learning and losing. "Director Mercer, we want help fixing what made this happen," he said. And that's how a whiteboard in a conference room turned into the Willow Harbor checklist. Verify before escalation. Deconfliction calls to 2 numbers. Not 1 civilian safeguarding protocols when minors or pregnant women are present. Supervisors sign off before separation bias. Interruption steps any officer can trigger simple. Seems like a small word until you try to do it in real time. And I argued we should put the name of the person who actually did the right thing at the top. Initiated by Officer A. Lamb, because people need to see themselves in the solution to believe they belong to it. 6 months after Ribs almost turned into a press conference, I stood in a room of patrol sergeants, trainers, community advocates, even a couple of hardliners who think humility is a conspiracy. Kroll stood beside me in a suit that didn't quite know him yet. He told the truth without seasoning. I was so sure I was right that I stopped trying to be sure. I let my pride do the part of my job that belongs to my training. It wasn't comfortable to hear, and it shouldn't be. Then I told my part that I stayed calm, not because I wanted to be a saint, but because I was a kid once who learned that some people look at you and see a decision instead of a person. And I built a life where facts matter more than grudges. And that day in my yard, I chose my daughter's memory of me over my anger. You know what I mean? People ask if I forgive him. My answer changes with the tide some days. Yes, because he looked my child in the eyes and said sorry and then did the work. Other days, I remember Monique clutching her belly while a man talked about processing children, and my chest gets tight, and I think about how cheap certainty becomes when you don't pay for it yourself. And that's the truth. Yeah, that happened. The question that won't leave the one I carry around like a smooth stone in my pocket is whether it would have ended the same if we weren't who we were. If those badges in the back pockets had been just wallets with family photos. If those quiet habits had belonged to warehouse workers, teachers, nurses. If those numbers we rattled off had been phone trees and not duty lines, and maybe that's not fair to ask in a town that prefers simple stories. But here we are, because policy is the thing you write when hope is late and reputation is not enough, and checklists are how you make sure pride remembers it has a boss. That night after the training, I scrubbed sauce off the grates and watched Maya draw on the patio with chalk that stained her fingers blue because yellow ran out stick figures holding hands that looked suspiciously like cops and neighbors, and one person in sunglasses who might be Janelle. And at the top, in crooked letters, she wrote, "Ask first, please." And I stood there a long time listening to the crickets and thinking about how simple it sounds and how hard it is for institutions to do, and I wondered what story the porch police told themselves when they went to bed. Did they say we stopped a criminal enterprise? Or did they say we watched a family be exactly who they said they were, and we learned something? I don't know, I don't live on that porch. If you've stayed with me to the end, here's where I hand the mic to you, because this part works better when it isn't a sermon. What do you think we owed each other? That day was Sergeant Kroll, a bad man who got caught, or a decent one, who let his certainty run ahead of his judgment? And does that difference mean anything to a child who learned to be afraid of uniforms at her own house if you'd been in my yard? Would you want me to take his badge, take his apology, or take his hand and make him stand in front of a room and teach what almost broke him? Drop your city. Tell me if your department verifies before they escalate. Tell me about a time you were read like the wrong book and how you turned the page, and if you believe stories like this can move us 1 inch closer to a world where we ask first and act second. Hit subscribe. So this one goes farther than my fence, then use the comments for something better than a hot take. Put your story there, your argument, your receipts. Because right and wrong aren't lines we draw once they're choices we make in real time in 10 seconds or less. And the next backyard could be yours. So let's get it right together.